당은 가서 가르쳐버렸으네. 당은 저기 삼로 당당 다 디기 주야래야. 디기 주야다 동화세야래야. 먼저 삼로 당당의 판에 디기 주야다 동화세에 탑람디 가서 쉬버래. 디간에제라나 다 당봉아서 가르 삼당으로서네. 심제 탐제 안에 대화의 tempo 쇼스에 삼다야다. 심제 탐제 랑리 진침보다 그진침보리 세배 삼다. 데니디자 심제 탐제 랑나 대화 되바나시 심제 탐제 대화 되바레 랑동아 미디바나제 심제 탐제 동아 미디바레 데자다 심제 탐제 대화의 tempo 쇼스에 근데 잠바콤 심제 탐제 동아의 자워 쇼스에 니제콤 고리에서 다니 심제 탐제라 세제 자, 데니게 디엔자 심자 탐지교 돈도 상교고 버터버 쇼스베 잔쇼 심 곰네 공부거리스 디곰바이나 아니 지게 이신 노블에 합비게 된초도 주비 된초 상교고 버터 투고리스 언도신 제 상교고 버터 투고리 디엔자다 만지게 심자 셴게 삼로 통요된 삼바타베네 안신 심자 탐지라 안지 잠바다 저와 어두스 공부를 다도 제벌 진보시 뒤다 남바군도 심자 탐지 잠바다 저와 공 되네 심자 탐지 동아돼야 된다 산요고바 토벌쇼 심비게 두시네 얘네 두치고 공부를 해서다 디응한테 삼로디 나야데 뱀마스다 계침무쇼시 해서 가산 저디 되네 삼당고에서 가상 뒤시고시로 가지.
Good morning. So yesterday we spoke about how we all want to abide in happiness, live free of problems and difficulties. Now, and also address there that the most effective method to achieve that is to transform our way of thinking, to radically transform our way of thinking. And so when looking at the first verse, we saw there that the method to transform our way of thinking starts by looking at our relationship with others, transforming how we think about others, coming to recognize our interdependent relationship with them, how deeply connected we are with all beings, and recognize the great benefit that they bring to us, the kindness that beings show us, and the benefit from the various activities that we achieve. And then, starting there, recognizing then also at a deeper level, we are all the same in wanting to be free from suffering and abide in happiness. And we use that recognition that we generate after developing a sense of closeness to others to express the wish, may all beings without exception abide in happiness. And this is the mind of love. And may all beings be free from all problems and difficulties. This is the mind of compassion. And we develop these two, love and compassion, further to the point where we're not satisfied with this mere wish. Even though it's strong within us, we take responsibility to ensure that all beings actually develop their mind to the point where they do abide in happiness and are free from suffering. And we take that as our responsibility, and to fulfill that responsibility, we commit to becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. This then is the mind of bodhicitta. So we saw yesterday in the first verse that the generation of bodhicitta, the cause that will lead to one becoming a Buddha, the attainment of Buddhahood, comes about in dependence on all sentient beings. Therefore, sentient beings are of greater value than a wish-fulfilling gem. Sentient beings, as the basis for us to transform our way of thinking, or the object towards whom we transform our way of thinking, they are of greater value than any material wealth or prestige or power or influence. They are of greater value than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So this meditation that was presented yesterday is one of extreme importance. And for it to radically transform oneself, one needs to engage in this meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, thereby slowly transforming how we naturally relate to others, relating to others with genuine love and compassion.
제 수단염도 도신 조백이 채나 안에 가게지가 냥아 요래 시자다 가야마지에 돈달라 가라삼당으로서네 안에 라신 심전 간에시 임베네 소소랑알레 하비기 키주르리 여바레스 지사디 키주 마 랑게 마싱비 콘솔레 예디 키주 여바자 디체네 삼당베나 콘솔레 아직 안 두신에 요래 되네 잡에 야부래 sempre 삼다제 두신에 나야 삼다만은 나야 기기 말해서 되네 자데 신기 연대 삼다 연대 삼다 되네 신기 삼바 타반에 배 야부래 sempre 다 될이야 잠바든 세워 두신에 삼당고래 되네 나야 기기 말해서 저 두신에 가상 것도 뒤고 쉬버리다.
Thereafter, in the second verse, we looked at the need to, at all times, wherever we are, whomever we are with, to be on guard against the arisal of pride, this inflated sense of self-worth that leads to one, which is an attitude of condescension, where one looks down on others. This mind of pride, which is contrary to holding others as dear, to valuing others. So, at all times, whomever we are with, in whatever circumstance, remind yourself that whomever you're with, they have qualities that exceed our own. They know things that we do not. And by reminding oneself of that, one guards oneself against pride, and it enables or aids our development of the recognition of our interdependence with others and the kindness and benefit we receive from them.
아디네 자다 디링한저 마시에데다 도스체 당한 저게 자와 내가 가르치베 나가저 류가기 쥐어바디 간시 직 제베네 안 당보 안 될이야 직 군론을 마서 삼론을 가르코도 되네게 어도스네 삼당고레세지 다디고 마시에데.
So now we'll continue where we concluded yesterday, and here the verse encourages us to look at our mind at all times, particularly to take care of our motivation, our intention behind our physical actions, our verbal actions, and our very way of thinking. So the third verse, and from here I'm just going to change the translation of the final line for all the verses in light of what Geshe's commentary yesterday. In all actions I will examine my own mind, and the moment an affliction arises, since it endangers others and myself, may I forcefully confront and avert it.
다니 그래서 죄람 군도 라유라 도전요 마게마타스 죄람 군도 라유라시데다 아주기 베네 죄람 자 레가로 가르치베네 베네 나게 죄바 기셰게 죄바다 류게 자와 가르치베네 데네게 자와 가르치베나 다 가상데나 베네 자와요레 아주 수단 염도 줘바다 강도 줘바 수단 염도 줘네 기셰바 이나다 네 레가 제바이나다 류가게 자와 가르치베네 안도신 자와지도 나 데네게 자와제게 예레 삼로나로 군로라야 랑이 귤라 데네게 군로데 간스 연구도 시비게다 남보랑 귤이야 도시네 제바제고레 예제레 도싱에서 제바제서 죄람군도 랑귤라 도시 도싱에서 제바제서로다 심주시고레스.
Looking at the first line, in all actions I will examine my own mind. So this term translated as all actions, more literally is paths of conduct. The meaning is what we had in the first line in the preceding verse. Wherever we are, at whatever time and whomever we are with, at such times. So in other words, whether we are doing something physically, whether we are engaging in verbal action, or merely just quietly thinking, at all times, one must examine my own mind, in particular here, one's motivation.
데네게 심주시에 랑이귤라 군로라야 되자 공로 나야 데네게다 기시비 갑리야 신리에 기시바이나 저 류기 자와체베네 다 군로데리아 되샤지 군에 랑제 안신레 기시바레 이나다 안지게 류기 자와 제바 레가로 가르치비네 어두시네 지 제비 갑리야 데네게 군로데레 녀모디 군로 되샤지 여바디 예담 데네 통화이나 아니 데네게 되샤지게 봐 가고레스 거다.
So what one is explicitly looking for in one's motivation is the presence of the afflictions. So whether what we spoke about yesterday, the pride is present. Perhaps pride when we are talking to others or doing something in the presence of others. Otherwise, perhaps attachment or anger. Any kind of afflicted mind, this is what we need to be on the lookout for. This is what we are examining to see whether the afflictions are present or not. Afflictions, one needs to be on guard against these afflictions because they are the source of harm. They harm ourselves, and through their expression, they bring harm to others. Therefore, when we need to be on the lookout for them and stop them, eliminate them whenever we become aware of them. For example, we spoke about pride yesterday. So when we notice that we have a condescending attitude towards others, inflating ourselves, then immediately we need to apply the antidotes and eliminate pride.
And the negi you want to do in a penang to Kuno de letter to a child, Condra, Naja, the Nas, Nusim, and the Jiget, Jansim Chato, Mangu Murua, Jansim Chato, the negi Yomobim, Lucian, the Shimjuche, the negi Shimjuch, the Yomobe Tongue, and the Garjos. The could never so what it is, so could be Gimzaka, Bango, or Gao, or a Gao could be Gimzakarson, Dashem Marun Chipinas. Jesa Digi. Rangla Nugore, Shala Nuga, Rashin Nigal, Ganti or S. Yomobadi. She's a dinner, Rang Marumba Chewa, so Ganga Maki was here, so Lega Nudricia, then Ganga Stigores. The Shala Yan, Ganga Tigores, Niti, Jezada Digi, Rashin Nigal, Nugum, Tashin Marumba Cheba in that, and go Bango Vicumsent, the Gao Vicumsent disorder.
In all actions, I'll examine my own mind, and the moment an affliction arises. So here one is on the lookout for any type of affliction, and also in terms of any strength, whether it's aversion or anger, whether it's attachment, pride, or competitiveness, whatever it may be, it must be eliminated. And the reason for that is in the third line, since it endangers others and myself. The very cause of our suffering are these afflictions. Their arisal within us serves to harm us, and their expression through our speech or our behavior brings harm to others.
ane anjik denegi luyugone anjik pa anjik chikon nyedong tanya la sobada nyoba cheba na ane chen ma de ba che chisan khondro ge de so so ma ji ba che kan simle ma ji ba che ma ji wo khondro di wongi an chen le ya anjik siksu ba lugi cheba ngam ba che de pa che shan de le nyoba che nyoe che da ra shin ni ga le nyoba cha go ro an di gi pa jo di ge ya so so le ya ji khondro sa yong ro da khondro sa de ne so so le su len lo de ji ra shin ni ga la kan ga tin chi do wa che sa da nyo mo ba khondro sa de da ra shin ni ga la kan ga che ya ma do ra shin ni ga pen rang la pen ba min lu xian le pen ba min du a san be ge du xin de khondro ge yuen lu du xin de sam dang go le ji.
To have the commitment to constantly be examining one's mind for the afflictions, and to have the conviction that afflictions are never to be justified and in all circumstances, and even when afflictions are slight, they are to be eliminated. To have such conviction requires one to come to deeply recognize the faults of the afflictions. This is imperative. Otherwise, it's all too easy to ignore slight afflictions or to justify them. So one needs to recognize that the mere arisal of an affliction disturbs one's peace of mind, takes one's mind away from virtue, and one loses one's own inner peace. Moreover, when one expresses an affliction, for example, through talking unkindly to someone or about them, we by the expression of this affliction, we express our own unhappiness, our own unhappy, dissatisfied mind. And in this way, we disturb the peace of others. And in particular, if we speak in a harsh manner directly towards someone, they are likely to get hurt by what we are saying. And in fact, they may have their own afflicted response. They may well lash out in kind, and then conflict comes. Now, our own lack of peace of mind that came from the arisal of the affliction, having expressed it, and the other person responding in kind, now we become even unhappier. So the point to come to is to recognize that afflictions only lead to suffering for oneself and others. And in particular this, that there is no benefit from the arisal and the abiding, nor the expression of the afflictions.
제가 가상 슈반한 시리에 아주 콘로세디게 콘로시 직축점을 랑지 집에 제베네 파졸이야 갑대줘야 콘로나베네 내가 뛰어시는 펜바 용식이래 펜바 용식 변에 직 소소 콘로시우지 라제 직 제베인 파졸 갑대줘베네 나 파졸이 안 파이 예제고 소소게 내가 강아세트야 용그리 이내 디기 푸라 나래 네바마도 펜바 준고 말에 세텔 삼다베네 제자다 콘로 사이비게 긴디기다 게 먼저 개와 치마 삼다마나 디기 디버 치모 슈사제 디기 제부디 마오바나 둥아요아치마도 둥아요아 차고래 제자 데네게 나선 마기야네 나선 마기려야다 데네게 안 개와 치마 둥아요아 차고 제자 데네 enza 콘로 사이디 지게 체텔레이네야 라신이가래 내봐 개와 치마이나 소설이야 동아요야 규로 차고 제자 데네자 데네게 삼노디게다 아제레 안아주 동아요야 규디 삼노디시레스 디솜배바 수고래 에세시 숨고래
So as mentioned yesterday, when anger arises within oneself and one expresses it, this just causes harm to others. But if one only looks at it from a self-centered perspective, what benefit do I get from expressing anger? Then yes, certainly, there can well be some short-term benefit. In particular, if you have a relationship of power or dominance or authority over the person to whom you are expressing your anger, then they may end up acting in accordance with your wishes, and then you can say to yourself, yes, that anger got what I wanted, therefore it was justified. But if one thinks just a little deeper, in terms of the harm to that person, the harm to your relationship with this person, you see there is really no benefit that comes from anger. And then in terms of the karmic consequences that will follow in lives to come, only suffering can come from anger. So one needs to challenge this perspective, the self-centered perspective, that some benefit can come from the afflictions. Because yes, looking at it on a very superficial, self-centered perspective, some benefit can be found. But that is very short term. The longer term, only suffering will follow, as well as harm to others. So this reflection is imperative, so as to come to recognize that the cause of suffering is the afflictions. And not wanting to suffer, I need to eradicate the cause. It's through eradicating the cause, namely the afflictions, I will gain freedom from suffering.
데네게 콘로세디 가즈리아 데스 누아레 콘르게데 다디나데 뇨 데샤세디게 베 나즈르게 디나 용티게 용초초로 차고레 제사 데샤디게 만주 레말레 당고하고 고마 데사 슈 첨보라 차는마도 지 중중질리데 하고에 갈레카고라 차고레 제사 데네자 데샤세디게 디네 용티 제사 데샤세디 용야에 게 망고 슈슈레 베네 칠로게 잘라로다 데네지 인제오라 통해데 차바게 chapa kya yung go, dosha kya yung go re. Nga zhuge mi zhuge chi nyingche wa zewa tongde, dela mi ne chapa kya yung go re. Ane zhuge soso gu lu la chapa kya, soso gu lu la oda nga zibu ya, nga subo ti yakbu ya se, tene chapa kya da. Da soso gu xi yun, juan na jo rwa, juan na xi yun li mi pe chapa kya. Ane desu li chapa kya de dine nga ya ki ho re. Juan tang. 소수기 지어로다 니디지 소수기 롭장 야고여바다 니바 야고여네 소수 전화 야고여다 옹아 전화 젤레 차지 안데네 차과게도 니기는 아야게 용아게 리고 지산 차과게데 아게 용리고래 그래서 당보 차과게 되는 아게 리고래 지산 도신 안디제 안네 아직 소수기 땀년달라 차과게 땀년다 오당아 깨라 자고 차나 안가 미수이 깨라야고 차나 선배기 소수게 땀년달라 차베 차바 너 소수게 롱조라 차베 차바 되네게 다 되네게 차바 빼 맛이 유해되다 연구를 진짜 차바게기 콘로게도 용아래 차바게도 게딘다 용아게 빼간주기 야고지 디와 전부지 지리가블 되네게 상고지 땡제 뒤에 지리가래 차바게 요래다 차바게 아니야요 아니 제 파조 참견으로는 되네 지신을 써보다 잘라닝적으로 통해 잡아게요. 진짜 되는 게 잡아게도 요들이 이내 잡아서야 되기는 동안도 저 숙천부 차는마도 중준 예배는 가서 하고 가보라 차고 진짜 잡아게 배 둠되어요. 그디나 영향이 영화 숙천부요시
Anger, and again, just to say this word anger, we should understand on a spectrum. So from frustration and annoyance all the way to rage and hatred. So all are included in the term anger. So anger is not such a frequent mind that arises, and its harm is also much more evident than other afflictions. So whilst it's fairly easy in certain circumstances to justify anger, it is still, the harm is much more evident than other afflictions, particularly when compared to that of attachment. Attachment arises very frequently and is very easy to justify. It's not always so easy to see the faults of attachment. Attachment arises in relation to so many things. Things that we see and like, attachment arises. We hear something pleasant, a nice music, a nice sound, attachment arises. Smell a lovely fragrance, taste something, touch something, a nice piece of fabric, attachment arises so easily. We see someone we like, attachment arises. Our own body, there is attachment towards our own body. We're very concerned about what others think about us and so forth. We have this attachment to our body too. Then also towards our various skills and talents, we have attachment. And one of the additional faults of attachment is it is often a source from which other afflictions arise, such as pride. For example, when we are attached to our various qualities, our talents and skills, then pride in relation to those skills will follow from attachment. We also will be attached to our reputation, what others think about us, our status. And we'll be attached to our various material possessions. So attachment is a difficult affliction to deal with because it arises so easily and we are so used to it. To actually recognize how often it arises and how easily it arises takes constant investigation, constant examining of our mind. Because it arises so easily in terms of the sense objects, things we see and smell and so forth, as well as towards our own qualities. It's difficult to recognize and very easy to justify.
아니 소소게 차바유도 디긴지 나야리고로와 아니 소소 차바유도 되네 아니 지 소소게 야고 차야 될래야 아니 지 예 안지게 통주 다야 안에 안지 콘도 차바기도 소수의 차바 유도 안델이야 안지 직현 현이 미디어바 마두바 제가 남성 콘도기야. 그래서 되게 너무 망보지 이게 차바라긴 해야 돼요. 차고래. 인지는.
Attachment is an affliction we need to really be on guard against, because it is difficult to recognize just how pervasive it is. And it's also an affliction that is very easy to justify. So part of coming to recognize the faults of attachment is to see its role in the arisal of other afflictions we can more easily recognize as harmful. So from attachment, pride easily arises. Pride in relation to our physique, our status, our skills and talents, and so forth. Also, from attachment, competitiveness and jealousy can easily arise, wanting to do better than others because of attachment, again, to our own status and so forth. And when our attachment to perhaps views, to getting our own way and so forth, is not fulfilled, then frustration, annoyance will arise. When things aren't going the way we want them to, our attachment is not being fulfilled, annoyance, frustration, maybe anger arises. And certainly in relation to others, when they have different views from us, different opinions from us. From our attachment not being fulfilled, anger can arise so easily.
마주 류가게 쳬바디 강다 강기 조마 야가치다 누가체 셴레 펜바치다 라신이게 펜바치 두고디 라신이레 녀바치 두고디 세데 군로디 군로 녀모바데라 라리고레 제상 군로디 녀모베 온도 군네 나시티 쳬바데네 라라 라신이게 녀바르 슈이치 용르 나 군로딜야 잠바단 제와 하상 슈바네 잠바네 제와 셴레 펜베 선비 군네시 라바 군로 쳬바네 디기 류가의 쳬바디야 약보차 라신이가 펜바시 용거를 디네 연자 마주 류가 쳬바디 다 라와의 메디겐 조 셈리아 원규 공로 셈레 원도 규리가 차거래 제자다 모델 마소나 당간로시디 당가주기 녀머스 나로게 삼로 공로도 차거래 삼로 공로 상보치레바나나 지게 예 모델 당한디 약보치 당조바나나 모델의 조서 약보죠 용구로 아다 데니게 야고마다제나 직다야다 내가 제요로 디나시 모저 강도 조마로데 난게 땅엔 제부 땅한데라 라레바나시 아주 류가의 쳬바 셴레 펜바치다 녀바치 조다 마로세디 난게 삼로 군로라 라리고레스 지난 군로 상보다 잠바단 제와다 셴레 펜베선비 군로 요바나 디 삼로데 가서 고야레 디기 류가의 쳬바데 야포체 델레 셴레 펜바단 네 라신이가 펜베 잡아 두고레스 내가 삼다메네 지자다 개와 치마 삼다메네 디기 개와 디 개와레다 셴레 펜베 삼바다 제베 삼베 데니게 자 삼로데 개와레 디기 잡아체도 안 개와 치마이네 양들이야 디기와야 규레 디기 두고레스 지상 공원 될라데 녀모바 되자 공로와 가게 되네게 공로 온다바나 릉아 쳬바데 셴리아 녀바데 체위스 아치 녀바치 용거레스 제자 라신이가 녀바치 용거 디엔자 디공로디 제바나 지자 먹어야 되다 되네게 삼마 공로 녀모바데레 디엔자 먹어야엔자 되네 녀모바데 라신이가 녀바치 용고요 반자 체데레나 라신이가 녀바 디 제고 개와 치마 삼다메나 동아야데 차고레 디네자 라신이가라 강아티비오 바자 단 녀모바디 잔답 돈에 도버쇼 스네 배수시 우주 접제호 바 직 까고를 매버쇼고레 해서다
Looking through the entire verse, in all actions, so everything that we do, whether it's physical conduct or verbal conduct, whatever we may do, examine the motivating mind behind that. And what you are looking for is the presence of afflictions, and if you find them, then one must forcefully confront and avert them. And one first forcefully confronts and averts afflictions, and one replaces them with opposite minds, wholesome minds. So afflictions or unwholesome minds need to be averted, and wholesome minds, virtuous minds, need to be cultivated. So what we are being encouraged to do here is, before embarking on any activity, speaking to someone or doing something, watch one's mind. And moreover, whilst engaging in that activity, keep examining your mind. And if you notice an affliction, immediately remind yourself of the faults of the afflictions, that they are the cause of suffering for myself and others. They cause suffering now, they cause suffering in lives to come. And in this way, avert the affliction, confront and avert it, and replace it with a wholesome way of thinking. Rather generate a mind such as valuing others, wanting them to be happy, wanting them to be free of problems. Open your heart to them. And in this way, those that you are interacting with, you will be emotionally holding them close, caring for them. And your mind then will be free of affliction. So doing so is strengthening your habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking is a way to have a healthy mind. Through that, we know there's a physical impact. Through having a healthy mind, a virtuous mind, one also has a healthy body. Moreover, if one's mind is afflicted, one is deeply unhappy, this not only causes one's mind to be unhappy, but has a negative impact on one's body. So an analogy I often use is, if you think of a car can only travel to a destination if the driver decides on that destination and then embarks and continues on the journey to that destination. So similarly, our mind can be controlled. And by controlling our mind as the driver, we control the resulting physical and verbal behavior, which is likened to the car. So if we ensure our mind is wholesome and virtuous, then what we say, what we do, will bring benefit in the short term and in the long term as well. So therefore, we need to go through this chain of reflection, coming to the point of recognizing that the afflictions only cause harm, but not leave it at that, but recognizing the contrary minds, the wholesome minds, are virtuous and required, and they have them as dominant within us. And when we ever notice an affliction arise, as it says in the fourth line, may I forcefully confront and avert it.
Dine zadang samlo lia du simju chine chi samlo ta be nang sewu shu ha go thya de ji lunga che be samlo ra lia pa yin ba pe nang samlo na le ya ta nye de wa sam be ne subud ma ra me ba je ma nye du go wa ta samlo na lia nga chi zhuo wa sam be ne ra me ba subud ku ge ji zhuo che go wa ta chi 다 파조의 갑래나 삼루디가 당아데 되긴 선배 삼로 코나 수부 다가라 하죠 거봐. 지선 수부들에 랑 유네메 되게. 지선 수부디 자산 가르치 매제 비주 당한디 삼로들이다. 지난다 계시에 다가 믹다에 다가 믹파도 따라서 삼로낭이 파기 따와서 만 믹파이다. 예를 따와서 예를 따르고 유두고래. 예를 따와 삼로나서 연철 따와서 믹도 연철을 코르고래. 지난다 ताकि मैं सब बेसम कोने काया मजो जुम दिगोर वादे जेसादी आजुगे लागबे जावा दा ल्युगे जावा दा गागे जावा दा मिगे जावा दा आमजोगे जावा 차사 소소 삼로 나라 라리게 삼로디 원규 삼로디 가리 제와섬나 델이야 조팅에 제거 제사 제사 삼로드 라리고래 제사 류가게 쥐바 사나 마사 셴레 판도 제다 마제세디 수수게 삼로나 공로 라리고와 제사데 삼로디 계시모 시우 차리가 제사디네 연장은 저기 삼로디 베지 지금 야와체 삼로 야도 야와체 야고디 뭐지 베지 땅 냠솔리 야게땅 디네 삼로 누가디 안네 지금 밤매봐서 그래서디 게마주바 마게바디 마게마주바 바가야 게 무슨 게위에 남상 마매봐서야 답시 땅 그래서 디송거로
Yeah, I encourage you to really come to look and come to recognize the primacy of mind, to recognize that our physical behavior as well as our speech has no freedom on its own. So take the body. Whether the body came here this morning depended on whether you set the intention. I will do so. And not merely set the intention, but made yourself do so. Likewise, when you came here and decided to sit, this required intention. I'm going to sit, and then I will sit, and your body then does as it is told. And likewise, if one is going to look at something, or like read something, one is going to listen to something, this only comes through the mind instructing the body to do so. And so too with speech. So why this is important to recognize is to see the primacy of mind, the primacy of mind over the body and speech. Therefore, by taking care of our motivation, examining our motivation, ensuring it is virtuous, we know that our physical behavior, our speech, will then be wholesome, will be virtuous.
Da so so gula nyumo de ki do me ju cheba cheje nyumo ki wa ha go yo de ane ra chin ni ga le ne ba chi ri di sem ma ro wa chi ri sem be sam da chi kyen thon ne dan ne lam sa ma ne pe che che de ba go ba me ba so wo re zan da do ba sho zan da do ne do ba sho se ti me ba so wo re se dan da de ti sung so da.
And the final point you see at the end of the first line, it says, my own mind. So this is where our focus is here. In all actions, I examine my own mind. And what are we examining for? Afflictions. And at the moment that we recognize an affliction, knowing that it's harmful, that it endangers others and myself, may I forcefully confront and avert it.
Then, member Suelia, that Dusha control said, you get our member Suedilla, and then Gargore Sene, then Dame to be share up comje, and Tomba to be share up comje, D on the member Sugar, Zawan member Suedi, Dame to be share up, Dame be Jebas, Dame about Dine, Dame to be share up Combalatine, and then or Jigre member Sugar.
To differing degrees of eradication that one can apply oneself to, and that depends on the antidote used. The most powerful of all the wholesome minds, the antidotes, is that of the wisdom realizing selflessness or the wisdom realizing emptiness. It is able to eradicate the afflictions entirely.
And the chukmet got and have to denigate up to Mavasolia, some tangwas in a cartangwas in Dangan, Condorusina, Lamsa, Jambata, Condorsa, Udila, Jamze Homo, Chisanda, Condorsa, Udilia, Jambata, Combina, Condor Shitu, Chisanda, Jamze Homo.
Whereas the wisdom realizing emptiness is the ultimate or the supreme antidote. There are many temporary antidotes which are much easier to apply. They still require extensive training, but if we take the antidote to anger, this is love and compassion. So to the extent one develops love and compassion, anger will not arise.
Midupa said Komori, yes, Midupa, that Dushagi, the Penanzu, Dusan, Utela, Dushak, Chawakis, Utelia, and Ejigi, Mikot Uti, Mui Nisu, Yun, Kanakaryova, Dusu, some Damores, then some Damina, Midupa, then I Jigget, Chawaki Mares, Chavanaka Dorores.
In terms of attachment, there the temporary antidote is to gain a more realistic perspective of what we are attached to. Because the mind of attachment exaggerates the desirable qualities of what we are attached to. So our mind is not in accordance with reality. So if we intentionally remind ourselves of the faults of what we are attached to, our attachment will subside because we are now getting a far more balanced perspective.
Namoringa ser kiakto that the nigga go shoe shuena, that delia caladilia chakbigi chakwa shoe chuna, that chava de doedelia, some garden caladelia, guenus dana, adadi caladelia, chicken genie mongoyore, and digi zegu mongoyore, this havena, that chicks on the subulia, peg in Nubaska Sharayama, Digian, Subul Neg, and Nazakia, mongoyor, two chick caladelia, guen mongora sometimes. And Dele Devaki Martine, Chapa the Pacar, do Shin Cala Delia, Nambi be Tixia la Kobo Shu, Chakadina, Dina Sense, Sashura Juven, Dina Kala del Gun Towers, Kogundi, at the D Kala Savana, Nazidin Sligide, Subolia, Denish New Chesande, Peggy, Denish Madayama, Didn't do Gun Davina, Dine Kala de Tisan Zagi, Chakad Mashu, Chundugres, Dordugres, and Dinashin, Azuki, Namunijek, Ajig, Chara to have it in a ship in a cover Shovina, and Delia, sometimes or that did know the Subulia, the Nazilia, the same, and the Carsore, same Jamatim Mivasua, Digi, Jamatim, Digi, and Emilia, Gishita Marashia, and Luju Jawad, Nibi Jawaja, that Jelia, Kanga, Mambo, Jean Chiresha, that Teneted to Minua, the Jim mother, Pass came Minua, some Jun Taitu, Delia. Gyun Kaya do soon sometime do, and Digi Telia Chapa door to race, Chisadina door to a tablam dynasty race, Chisan Zanapton, Dover shores and Dusin, Gyun Daji Dusin, door race.
So if one is struggling with attachment to food, often it's sweet food that we are very attached to, like delicious cake. So if one wants to deal with one's mind, and one will look out for the arisal of attachment. And when one sees the attachment arise in relation to the cake, then one needs to remind oneself of the fault of eating the cake. Remind oneself of the ingredients and the effects those ingredients have on the body, the sugar and the fats and so forth. And ask yourself, do I really want that? Likewise, that by following my attachment in terms of my mind, I will strengthen this habituation to following attachment. My attachment will become ever stronger, and therefore the negative results that follow from attachment will come more frequently. So whilst there is some benefit, because we're trying to get a balanced perspective here, whilst there is some benefit to eating cake in that it tastes nice, the faults far outweigh the benefits. Here now, the attachment is reduced because one is looking at what one desires in a more realistic light. And likewise with alcohol. There one recognizes that, yes, there are some benefits to drinking alcohol. It tastes nice. It relaxes the mind. But the faults are greater. I come to rely on something to relax my mind, to deal with the stress, something that is not a particularly skillful technique to deal with my mind. Moreover, alcohol contains a lot of sugar. This too causes harm to my body. Also, if I have a little too much, then I may say or do things I later regret, and I may even harm my relationships. So what's being said here is realistic, both in relation to the cake and the alcohol. It is entirely realistic. And this, looking then at what we desire in a more realistic manner, serves to reduce the strength of our attachment.
Denege Ranjugi and Denege some Dambina, Lucine and Chawaki Mares, Chisada Jala Roshine, Jala Yabu, Pechik, the Yungurang to bit Jukong Chimbodan, Yingjo, La Shuchi, that Yabudu, Nalet in the Chunas and Pegata, Chik Pe, Shushi, that's Sosugi, Tablam, that got Juna Digua, that men and that Sosugi, the Raga, Tablam, and Shiwukane, Chawaki and Jungura, Denisi. Delia and Udelia and got Guenro, Tabena, order, the Jaladio Conchimbore, in that did a Cholo, Gigi, Dusin Guenro, Tabena, Dusin Chapaki Mares, Cesada Dusin, some Tangores, Dinashin, the you got the kind, Tanganjugi, Chica, you, and Jimmy, Millinetta, Chapaki say you. And me nada, Simjin nada, Sulina Chawakevana, the Niki Chawai, Toy, Tablam delia, Ujelia, and Dusin, two Genos, Miduba Comores, Miduba Combaina, then the Chapatores, Tablam Chifungore.
Likewise, if you're thinking to buy something, in particular if it's something quite expensive, maybe there's a bit of status attached to it, there, when attachment arises, particularly if it's strong, you'll be thinking about this a lot. It will dominate your thoughts. There, it's very clear, I have strong attachments, I need to deal with this. So you remind yourself of, yes, there are some benefits to possessing this, but it's expensive. Do I really need to spend that kind of money on it? It will also not last. It will not stay shiny and new, but it will become old and marked quite quickly. And it is unlikely to be as useful as I expect. Moreover, so thereby one is looking at whatever one desires in a more balanced perspective that serves to reduce the attachment. Then it's also very skillful, having recognized attachment, to look at the faults of that affliction. And that, as mentioned earlier, remind yourself of the faults of remaining attached to things, remaining deceived and guided by one's attachment, how it harms myself now and through these causes in lives to come, how the expression of attachment, maybe not necessarily in this instance, but by remaining dominated by attachment, how it does lead to causing harm in the lives of others. And in this way, becoming averse to attachment, that also attachment in general will serve to reduce our attachment to this particular item.
chokshero samdane denige chapage de dothugore ben chokshero samdane deso gon chembore tan ngan soso beje dayage 직 충주 가려베나 띵이 바 바도 기시야 다 디소 가르치는 베지단데 디게 디기도 와스 디게 베지 땅투도 데디 공 첨보진 인여베네 딜을 하바진가 베지단 다야스 가요 말에 와스 유민도 와스 데디 공 첨보레 마사선 안지 털어던 벨 펌보차게 데네게도 samda 딩한 강요 교치나 디기는 디기도 선배게 삼다나 초시 디기도 선배인데 초시 개베는 유대를 잡배 잡아야 맞게와 용거래. 다 답람도 신나서 되는 마무 용거래.
For example, if one's looking at a new phone, the new one has been released and it looks quite wonderful. The advertisers are doing a good job at marketing all its wonderful new features. Ask yourself, do I really need a flagship phone? Do I really need something that expensive? When I look at what I use my phone for, do I need all these things that these phones can do? When I look at how I use my current phone, do I use all of these features? Or would just an average run-of-the-mill phone not do just as well? So this is just a simple illustration. It's easy to understand. But the idea throughout these examples is the same. You come to a more balanced perspective at what you desire, and that will calm the mind. And ideally, too, look at the faults of the affliction.
지gle 미네 제주의 내부 공부이나 되네게 삼로디게 남도 삼로 드라마로 코라기 바시지네 두스네 뢰샤 용거래 제산디네 엔자다 소수게 강아데 셈 되네게 몽고테도 되네게 시에 탑람모서 젠답진 다 거두 코란데 되네게 매바서야 탑람데라 잠제 kom야 아니지 유텔이야 아니 미도보 kom야 되는 우중고 kom야 아니지게 오도시네 유지래 미네 제주니 베 띵에 정 kom야라서 두시에 공부이나 된 양지 강야 삼마다게 지야이라 제가 나시 두시 공부네 두시 되베네 남도티 바시신 relation 소소 내가 강아지세 투야 용거래.
And a further common antidote to apply is when one's mind is full of discursive thought. The mind just isn't keeping quiet, but is busy. Then watch the breath, calm the mind. Do it for a few minutes, calm the mind. So this helps with an overly active mind. But whilst it feels good and it's much nicer to live with a calmer mind, don't leave it at that. Having calmed the mind, then cultivate a mind of actual value, such as love and compassion and so forth. So watching the breath is very effective to calm the mind. But unless one is specifically training to develop calm abiding, rather use now this calmer mind to cultivate a far more useful virtuous mind, such as love or compassion.
안디네 도시네 당한 저기 샘 녀몽바디기바 내갑도에 탑람나 도시니치 삼당고래 세대도 나님보디디리 지사 내갑 샘 녀몽바기에도 또 심주시 제바제 녀몽바 여바다 하고 있는데 내갑야 도합에 탑람들이야 도시는 삼당고래 세대 나삼 내갑도에게 탑람디기 도시는 숨고래.
So these then are some illustrations of antidotes to the afflictions. So temporary antidotes that will help reduce the afflictions when one notices that they have arisen.
내내기다 자원에 매바 삼당고데 방에 탑람데 방고고로 된 탑람다데 녀몽바들의 규현다 제세의 규현다 현대 가르고 유도스제 되는 녀몽바게 즉 영상 간에서 연구도 심주제 되는 되는게 심주제네 녀모바 직계와 나신 되니까 연구도에 민도 두고에 민도 심백이다 다음에 베게 동방이 라신이 좀 마두가 제바지네 동방이 두비 셰랍 되네요 검제 되니까 어느 공발에 되네 자원이 녀모 자원이 봐야 돼 되는 방호래지.
To have the strength of mind to confront and avert afflictions and be on the outlook for them, it's imperative to recognize their faults and to recognize how they arise. When one has some skill in dealing with the mind in this way, then one can come to try to apply the ultimate antidote, the most effective antidote, that of the wisdom realizing selflessness.
제사다 제세 시월에 진비게 가르sun 거라서네 당하도 두시네 나 녀몽바제 두신 아주 강아지 소주 디기 주고고이나 소소 동화세 고고이나 동화 영화디 가르가데 가르스 연구도 세베 유 될라 제바 제제 다들 녀몽바 될라드네 동화 연구도 선배 삼다지 니 매바스 고고어데 아니 띵아주기도 쇠신교 제신교 말레스 베나 다 동화세에 아주가 강아체 되 강아세야라 가르치고르스네 디스고르 데니치고르 제르베네 시왈 동화들도 셈여장 동화니라 원버규고 아니 대화 되장 디무베 랑이 대화 자들 좀 제 도신 송어래.
Yesterday I quoted a couple of verses from the first chapter of Shantideva's Engage in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Now I'll quote a further verse, the 28th verse, wherein he points out that whilst beings don't want to suffer, they remain ignorant or confused about what causes them to suffer. And whilst beings want to be happy, they remain ignorant or confused about what causes happiness. And thereby, beings continue to make wrong decisions and go down the wrong path, not the path that leads to lasting happiness, but to continued suffering. So the 28th verse from the first chapter. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. Though longing for happiness in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy.
제사 동화되게 세미에 양세랑 아주 차상리야 동화지 먹어야 돼. 동화디 매버서에게 삼로 요래서 동화 고고 말해스. 제사다 동화 먹어봐자 당한주가 가지고 왔으네. 미션다기 마즈리아 네바기 추보를 쉬어봐나 더 직지 현지 네바 제바나 이 하는 아주 가르치고 그래서네. 내려야 오늘이나 서버 공고거래. 서버 먹으면 제가 아주 가르치고 왔으네. 디 동화디 소설에 네바기 파 도비게 탑람리아 파 콩럽게 호파 채와제 네바치고 그래서 디 네바 제바디기 동화이도 뭐 디 탑람디 동화영의 규례마도 동화세에게 규 말해서 탑람 말해서 그다 동화이도 뭐 규세데 제가 동화 국어 말에 동화의 매바세에게 탑람들라 가르베지도 동화 망아영에게 삼로디 베지단 거래서 디니 제바 동화 망아영마도 동화세토예요 말해서 송을 다디 덴바로 와다 당아주 두 삼다베네 파줘 되게 땡 야보 지기 민두세야제 파녀 기고로 와서데 마제고로데 마제 섬든 데네 마시게든 출래 갑대주는 마차에메 봐 로망고시나 마차에메 봐 아니 랑게 미망고시 파에 미셔다 망고시 유변주를 쳐라 줘봐 미망보 세서 쇼와데 먼저 통치수기 봐 차대로 지자디 피기딩을 강한 제기도 강한 용서에 삼제 소수의 강하게 세이 탑람래야 아니 동화야야 유파 즉 코라랑 파 채와제에게 jawa cheyodu digi dunga manga yongore dunga se tugo mares chesande di se tugo mar chesa di insa te dunga yoya dugo marde dunga midyo ba dunga sege tablamla ane 가르치고 있는 dunga yoya manga yoya gidi tablamdi peje tang duwa sorda dunga iturti semyoja dunga yidunga bar yukse disi wore nidi
So look at the first two lines. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. So recognizing that ourselves as well as others long to be rid of suffering, this is very clear. No one encounters suffering and is delighted. We do not want to suffer. No one wants problems. No one wants difficulties. Yet, how we respond to unwanted circumstances all too often makes our situation worse. Very seldom do we genuinely respond in a skillful manner. So, for example, if someone acts towards us in an unwanted manner, usually this would be they speaking unkindly to us or about us, or they're doing something against our wishes. All too often, we respond in an afflicted manner. The skillful response is having long trained in patience. Our mind will stay undisturbed by what they are saying or doing. Our mind will remain open and relaxed. Then we can respond skillfully with minds of love, compassion, and wisdom. This is how a skillful practitioner responds to harm. But this is not so common. All too often, when things do not go how we want, either if someone's acting towards us in a particular way, or we're having our own normal inner turmoil, or outer circumstances we do not like, we respond with our afflictions. We insist we want things to be the way that we want them to be. And when others disagree, we argue with them. We may even then have a long-going dispute with them, insisting our way is right. And this could even lead to hating someone and decades of dislike towards someone. Every time you think of them in a negative way. And with those who have power, leaders of countries, they, in order to have things go their way, may well command their military to start a war. And from all of this action, from the extreme end of warfare, right the way through to insisting on our own way, this is not skillful. It just leads to conflict. It just leads to unhappiness, and it just leads to a perpetuation of unskillful ways to deal with situations.
gerda chasang yung korwa ta pene sosugi digi chupo na pene nga zo gerro samtana ta sosugi pasho de nga nyesara nga jingje ni lega di jawa chebale ko parche jiudu nga le kangan jesar sembe samlo shona namsa delia ande jinga zo khora la che kholia nebe jawa chewe jawa kar jeodu khola kar jik jeho sembe samda ji bejidan ji jikorwa digi ane ralia jige kangan 동아야 귤마도 대용거 말해서 제산디 동아 규차로 그래 되네다디 대 동아게 세탑디 세베 탑람디 야고 말해서 오르다 세베 탑람디 야고 말해서 지단 열 컨디션에 파쇼게 뇌외게 뇌살에 선배 소소 강한 체살에 선배 디강한 세에 탑람라야 안 소소에 삼노나래 파쇼레 체외 삼노 베지 당여디 체외 삼노 뇌베 삼노지 코로요디 안에 코어메디 코메바 수기 콜레지 강한 제긴스베 뇌베 삼바 체외 삼바 레어디 르강이 주베 자와디 체외 자와를 두고레스 디네 주여도 안에 파쇼레디 뇌베지디 안 파쇼게 수라 카디에 줘야지 디네 강한 좋아해 메바게 디나 무디 야야 디네 강한 뭐래 제사디진 두체베네 지진은 파쇼디 소셜라리아 네버 슈체기네 강한 체소야게 냐가 여러분 디네자 누시는 거래서 제산디 삼나타데 디고 말레스 제산 동안이로 엄벌규세 동안요 규리바 베지단 거래 디디고 말레스 거래.
Another source of conflict is when we are wanting to do something and someone else is an obstacle to us doing that or doing it in the way that we want. So this could be at our place of work, it could just be in traffic on the road. that when someone impedes what we are wanting to do, invariably our response is one of afflictions. We respond perhaps just with getting annoyed, or we respond with expressing that. We get aggressive, or we get insistent. I want it like this, you must change. So here, the mistake that is being made is not necessarily that one is responding or one is trying to resolve the situation. That is not necessarily the fault. The fault is that the mind is afflicted. Therefore, the way one is responding is necessarily unskillful. Whatever the result is, whether you get your own way and it works out for the better or not, one's method was unskillful because it was afflicted. So therefore, if one responds with anger, one responds with aggression or insisting on one's own way, that method is at fault. Rather, one should respond with a patient attitude. Because if the mind is undisturbed, one can then respond with love, compassion, and wisdom. In other words, skillfully. In this way, one may still get the desired outcome, but one's means by which one gets that outcome is skillful. And we are therefore habituating ourselves to skillful behavior, to wholesome behavior, rather than continuing our habituation to afflicted behavior, unskillful behavior. So this is the difference. The quality of mind under whose influence we respond.
수수 파 코로나교 말해시래요. 세보금시데 파 코로게 뉴베 삼바 마게시 마게바지 데네게 파 동아 세 탑람디 안에 지강아 세 탑람디 소수기 리바 남주 베지 다제 안에 네고 간시 제고도 탈론세 삼당고리마도 소수기 파 네베 삼노 체베 삼노 다제 자와디 안에 세 탑람 다교 말 체베 삼 다교 말에 파 세베 삼데 파 체와 마게바지 네베 삼노 마게바지 데네 파 쇠복곰 한 닝지기에 데네게 녀바치에서 닝지에 선배 닝지곰 데닝지기에네 쇠바다 닝지곰제 안델이야 안직강하세게 탑람디 루타 튠비기 안지게 김찬의 덴비 토네 네 강하세게 탑람디 타 세고레 세고레.
The most skillful response to when things don't go how we want them to is one of patience. And again, this is most easy to see in relation to others, but also in terms of just our life in general, or our own way of thinking, our own inner turmoil. When things don't go the way we want, to respond with patience. So the meaning of patience is that one's mind is undisturbed. Because if the mind is undisturbed, one can think clearly. One is not afflicted. So for example, if we someone is acting against our wishes, if one has developed the meditations presented earlier, one values them, one cares for them, one wants the best for them, then one will be holding them close, and one will easily be able to have a mind dominated with love and compassion. This is possible because the mind is patient. And because one's mind is patient and loving and compassionate, because you value this person you're interacting with, you can then think clearly and use your intelligence or wisdom. And by thinking clearly, because your mind is not afflicted, you can respond in a skillful manner. So again, what is being emphasized here is the quality of mind by which we respond, not necessarily whether we are asking them to change their behavior or not, but the quality of the mind through which we respond to them.
지사다 소소한 대화 되게 안에 소소기 대화제 되는 대화 토비하기 자와디 베지체도 로바 베지 따이도 랑이 대화디 배지 좀 자원하신지 매바 셔서고 해지래 배나 benedigo 하다가 저기 가르에서네 소소기 대화돼 봐서 나 대화치 고도 기우고도 세상이 고알이야 알이야 튕긴 벤저에 무이 되는스 고고도 선배 삼로 땅에도 디기 주에 튕긴 주에 삼 땅에도 다 대화돼야지 대화 되바들에서 대화 두비야를 튕긴지 고르거다. 튕긴 탑람디 베지 가르탄 고르세는 안에 생기 잘하고 먹고야. 되네 나송지야. 팀담이 교회 빼내다 나송만 거 되네 제가도. 뒤서 가르쳐 지고라서는 수수기 디기 두비야기 수수 강아시에 수수기 디기 두비야기 된다라 디기 두비야라가 튕긴 거고를 와다. 제산 튕긴 디기 두비야기 튕긴지 디기 두비 튕긴 탑람디 베지 땅에도 생기서는 고마고야. 생기서는 초점제야. 안에 생기 집에는 팀당 가위기 제 나송으로 제어도 다디 탑람디 디기 두비에게 탑람 차고 말해. 그 디기 끼인 전에 안에 가르치 그랬으네. 아다라니 안에 신경도 주전강 줘야다. 안에 수소쇼 기디나다 직전강나로 강아 쳐야지. 다 되는게 어두신의 차용으로 제자는 랑이 대화디 매와서 대화용하되 유동안 대화용하게 삽려야 누가 먹을래요. 제자 대화디 자들 좀 매와서야지. 누가 기용을 제자디 대화 뒤에제 대화 주비게 탑람디 노출시 현례의 체외 삼바 네베 삼비게 돈의 제용도 되네랑이 대화 매바 마세 랑리의 대화용하게 삽려야 누가 봐도 매바 용거에 차고 그래야지 돼. 무슨 뭐래.
Last two lines. Though longing for happiness, in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So again, we all want to be happy. We all want to abide with a joyful, peaceful mind. But we do not clearly recognize the causes for happiness. Invariably, we think by managing our external material conditions, happiness will come. So, and therefore, thinking that the dominant cause of my happiness is the material world, anything material, we then, with this exaggeration, we then put misplaced energy into gaining material comforts. This all too often comes with unethical behavior, taking advantage of others, deceiving others, perhaps even illegal behavior, defrauding others, stealing from others. But certainly, unethical behavior is all too common. And the result of this isn't happiness. Because no matter what one does to one's, how one manipulates or controls or develops one's material world, that cannot lead to lasting happiness. Moreover, where one is becoming known for being unethical, this will have a negative impact on our relationships with others. People won't really like us, they won't really trust us. They may still need to interact with us, they may still need to be polite to us, but they won't trust us. Therefore, we'll be separated from others alone. Or if we commit illegal behavior, we may well end up imprisoned, and then our reputation is destroyed. So what we see here is that fault again is our method, our technique, that we think that this various activity will lead to happiness, but it just leads to further suffering.
그래서 수수기 대화 주위에 있나 단 대화 주위에 탑람들라 만호하시 오래 세상 현리의 체외의 누바라 현리 미니비기 안에 삼례되네 도시네 안에 수수기다 추다 팀비 팀나 팀비团다 수수기 자와 가서래 내가 제시 디기 주위에 탑람디 다 도시네 주보고리 마도 현리의 체외 삼바 네베 삼비 군이 라제 도시베이나 안에 삼로 안에 그 다시 제시 우리 예수 이 누구도 되는 제반나 내가 디 제반나 라나 가는 누구도 샬라 가는 누구도 집에 심주 제제 제바제 안디게 또 제바제 민의비게 통도 되는 게 자와 주고 우리 마도 지가 제와 맞아봐 어디 야광서 삼제 지세반의 띠무 봐서 우리 예수디 탑람 마싱 바차로 그러 마싱 비게 두바이나 디기디 매바서 그래서 제가 되는자 우리 예수 탑람 주탄 신바제 만노와제 안니지 라시에 민의바 팀다 미가비 돈에 안데 도시는 자와 주고래 되네 디기 주고래 해야 돼. 송모르와.
So what is required to achieve the happiness that we desire, to be free of suffering and problems, is to come to understand and then engage in the faultless method to achieve happiness. At the very least, what we do should be ethical. And the judge for whether something is ethical or not is whether it brings harm or not, whether it brings harm to oneself or to others, now or in the future. So this is how we overcome confused ignorance. I'll read the verse again. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. They're longing for happiness in their confused ignorance. They destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So this confused ignorance is whereby one doesn't really know or is confused about the causes of happiness. And therefore, one engages in activity thinking, this will bring me my desired result, happiness. But it does not. So this is what we need to come to know and come to recognize the faultless method and live in accordance with that. At the very least, it should be ethical, not bring harm to others or ourselves.
Dunga sosuge dunga doya ko di ngala ne sare di ngala ya chi ka che sare sembe di ma doya ge tablam de ya nga dunga se ya tablam kar pe chi tan go sene ane chi pa khon la pa chewa che ge samlo di pe chi ta che chawa chi go ro ba dine che be ne dunga se tu ya gi ne ya ma le la de kar sene de jun jun na yang ge sung go ro ba semje nam kha ane ka sa semje mi sun nam kha shin de da shom gi mila ya an choye semde chik chomna an jade tham chik chomba gyurus. Chezanda, oda midigi da ngaso digi ngal nyugudu di yakuminde se ko chik meba suyana yangya chik duyong gore, yangya chik duyong gore. Chezanda, ko semje denige samdana meba suyo chaya khora yoma namga na chi res. Chezanda suyo chaya khora yoma res. Chezanda, di mena anada sosol ya kang matiya samla khar tangore lamna suyo gyule yubiga shenle nube samba da choye samba kongro di pa di meba suyo gores. Di meba suyo, shenliya jambada zewa kum, shenliya sueba kum, suebe nyamne je, jamze nyamne jewa ina, sosuyo chowe semdi, an ma yungba res. Sosuyo chowe semdi mena, ane sosuliya nyewe jade yungba res. Chizadi, jiga sosuyo gyule yue ding, chowe samlodi pa, nyewe samlodi pa jomba ina, chiloge jasamje meba sueba jikba res. Chizadi sosuyo nyewe de yungba res, di sungwa res.
In these first two lines again, though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. So in particular here, in terms of the response of anger, anger can never lead to happiness. We can never transform our outer world so that it is in accordance with our wishes at all times. Our moods change, our wishes change, and to expect others to always act in accordance with our wishes in that moment is ridiculous. Likewise, our mind is often untamed, doing its own thing, and to expect our mind to always be the way we want it, this is not going to happen. We need to have a different response, not one of frustration, annoyance, or anger. And Shantideva says further on this point. So this we covered earlier this year in the 12th verse of the 5th chapter. Beings with untamed minds equal space. They cannot possibly all be eradicated, but subduing this mind of anger alone equates to subduing all enemies. So I'll read this 12th verse of the 5th chapter again. Beings with untamed minds equal space. They cannot possibly all be eradicated, but subduing this mind of anger alone equates to subduing all enemies. This then is stating very clearly that we cannot change the minds of others. We can, though, change our own mind. By subduing our own mind of anger, no one will upset us. It will be as if we have no enemies. It will be as if no one is talking badly to us. No one is acting unkindly towards us because of subduing our own mind. When our mind is well trained, and to whomever we encounter, whatever they are saying or doing, our response is one of patience, then we will respond with love, compassion, and wisdom. And it'll be as if we have no enemies, as if there is no one acting unkindly towards us. So therefore, the only response that leads to happiness is love and compassion. To summarize what we've looked at in this third verse, we need to come to recognize that the afflictions are the cause of all suffering, and the afflictions are what prevent us from experiencing happiness. Therefore, we need to be on guard against afflictions at all times. Whomever we are with, whatever we are doing, we need to be on guard against their afflictions. And when they arise, eradicate them.
Dine za da ngan zo jida ngan zo le ya des nyomo ba je de lam sa sam da je nyomo ka thu ya de des ka le ha ho le zo komshi jang do me de da komshi ye da jang do ye kan zo lam sa nyomo ba je de ha ho de lam sa nyen bo den je da lam sa ka thu ya de yong go de ma da ngan zo le ya des komshi me de nyomo ba de ki ge me shira ha mo ge se de ko pon no ru chung sa de ma da ha mo ro wa da dine 용거래. 제자당 한줄에 약쇼의 가르에서는 그 녀모 마지 녀는 원고 제에 빼기신 버다. 원고 제수도가 가르선 당한 두시네 마지 녀는 오다 디능이 시행기 두스녀버 체주열이야. 내가 가르쳐베네. 시행을 뇌베 자와 싸우기는 지금이야. 시행을 팬베 자와다 강투도 지기 시행심도 가상 슈바나지 시행 삼로들이야. 시행심제 탐제 대화 두고래 동안 미디어 바래. 지사 시행이야. 대화 주야다 동아시엘량의 자와 강투도 지기 마도 셴리아 뇌베 자와다 셴리아 콘로세라 소바 다 안지기 되 차와기야라 소바다 마제기야라 소사오기는 지금에 선배게 두진의 삼로디 마도녀만의 두신의 두삼다베나 데니 삼로디 야네 양다베네 니 뉴모바디 마제기 샤라이케바요레 된 그시ike베나 람사 되서 하고 고투에게 개발 연구래. 제가 디네 상한 주디 계시셔야 돼 디래. 원예는 원과 오다 디는 미션다게 말이야. 콘롤랑을 주변에 파 콘롤랑이 매 쇠보금 투비지기야 선배 삼다야. 데니기 강한 체베네 셴리아 즉 체외 자와 자원이 지금이야. 다 셴리아 팬베 자와다. 셴리아 즉 로봇 강투도 지긴 선배 삼다. 도치네 삼다이디 제자디 지금에 선배된 셴레 뇌베 자와 세외 자와 자원의 지금에 제자 녀모버든 삼론을 기니 기중에 선배 디 삼론의 야네 야노 따야디 배 판도 요래 난절이야디 디제드네 제투야래 가서는 고 강아마티년도 삼다디 나투야 차거 디네 삼라 야네 야노 따베네 삼모 디기 슈긴기 제리아 안에 디네 삼론의 마호야다 슈체 용거래 제자디 이 냠는 제데 dondaala tsurimre, tsurim suna seksiyorada, 제가 tsurim 냠는 채고. 다디나데 굴롱 가상은 저 장주 셈 잠니제 장주 셈 시소 굴롱 디레 디니 선에는 가지고 tsurim suna 돼 차고래. 제가 진바다 tsurim 쇠베 냠는 전류 냠는 다 파진류에 냠는 데 차용 거데. 장주 셈비게 랍제 냠는 치에.
Skilled meditators, no matter what they are doing, they are aware of their mental process. So for them, when we see in all actions, I'll examine my own mind, whether they're talking to others, they're engaging in various physical activities, they are aware of their mental process and thereby can keep their mind free of their afflictions. They are able to do this because they are skilled meditators. They've developed deep habituation to watching their mind. They're not so involved with what's happening around them. They are primarily focused on what's arising within. But without being such a skilled meditator, that is difficult to do. Well, it's not possible yet to do. So therefore, the technique that we should apply is to take care of our mind from the outset. So at the beginning of the day, to establish a firm and genuine motivation for the day ahead. And to the extent that this is a firm and genuine motivation, it will have an impact throughout the day. And if one can, from time to time in the day, recall that motivation, that will help keep it fresh. So, if in the morning one sets a motivation that today I will only be of benefit, I will not bring harm to others. And this is because I value others. You do the meditations as mentioned before, developing an appreciation for others, recognizing how they have shown us so much kindness, their various activities, even if they have no idea who I am, they bring benefit to me. Developing thereby an appreciation for them, a valuing of them, recognizing that at a fundamental level, we are all the same. Then, develop that further. May all beings have happiness. May they be free of suffering. In particular, think about that in relation to those you are going to come into contact with that day. developing the wish, may they be happy, may they be free of problems and difficulties. You develop this well within yourself. Then later, when you are interacting with others, that motivation, if it's still present, will have an impact. And if now you are meeting with someone that morning you have meditated on, may they be happy, may they be free of problems, and now they're talking to you in an unkind manner, either to you or about someone else, then in dependence on that meditation, the thought may well arise. Your mind is disturbed right now. May you be happy. May you be free of the afflictions. And in this way, you yourself are guarding your mind. So I encourage you to take this approach, because this is within our grasp, it is within our means, but it requires you developing a strong and sincere meditation, keeping it fresh throughout the day. So the meditations that you are developing here are meditations of love and compassion that we've spoken about, which gets developed into bodhicitta. This incorporates aspects of the mind of generosity, in that it's a wish to give of yourself to others, to be of benefit to others. And now it's also taking the light, or the hue perhaps, the hue of ethical restraint, not wanting to harm others. So wanting to benefit others, which is an expression of love and compassion, and not wanting to harm others, ethics, that's also an expression of love and compassion. So we see how the 6 perfections are starting to be cultivated within, although they haven't been mentioned explicitly. They are being cultivated within. And as when we move through this short text, the 6 perfections will all be found here. So then thank you. We can conclude there for this morning. Thank you.